TG Shepard has always had an unstoppable passion for music, and this passion, along with 21 number one hits and being ranked among the top 100 country artists of all time, has made him one of the most popular live performers on tour today. It's only natural with a show chock full of chart-topping hits like Last Cheater's Waltz, I Loved 'Em Every One, Do You Want to Go to Heaven, and Party Time, that TG has developed a reputation as a solid performer who delivers exactly what the audiences want. Well, TG Shepard has given multiple performances at the White House and a regular guest on the Grand Ole Opry. And the country music legend is celebrating the 40th anniversary of his 1982 album, Finally. The title track became Shepard's 10th number one song and proceeded to remain at the number one spot for a total of 10 weeks. Other hits include Only One You and fan favorites Crazy in the Dark and In Another Minute and more. Well, TG Shepard is the host of, the TG Shepard Show on SiriusXM's Prime Country, which features some of entertainment's most well-known names, where he interviews his close friends and guests such as Priscilla Presley and Travis Tritt, Dolly Parton, even Lionel Richie and Sir Barry Gibb and more. Well, with 21 number one hits to his name, let's welcome the one and the only TG Shepard. Welcome, friend.
Wow. Hey, Doc, what an intro. Where do I send the check?
Well, I tell you what, I think one of my goals, and I think I told your wife Kelly this, one of these days I would love to do that even for you on the Grand Ole Opry stage.
Well, I tell you, I'm very blessed to be able to play that stage quite often. I just recently played it, and it's always a pleasure and an honor to stand in the circle where so many people who paved the way for me and other performers. It's an honor to stand there. So, yeah, I live a very exciting life. I'm very blessed. And of course,
Oh,
I'm married to Kelly Lang, and that doesn't hurt either. I mean, I get to spend my life with a beautiful lady.
oh, absolutely. Well, what was it like the first time that you got to stand in the famous circle at the Grand Ole Opry?
Gosh, it's been so many years ago, Doctor. I remember I was very nervous, and there's always butterflies when you work the Opry because there's a lot of artists on those shows each and every time you perform there. The first time was, I was a chocolate mess. I was nervous. I was scared. I didn't want to disappoint the Opry. I didn't want to disappoint the fans, and it was just a very stressful evening. But as time goes on, and you do it a few times, you relax into it, and you learn to really enjoy and honor the Opry and the people that play there on a regular basis. So yeah, I was pretty nervous, but still get the butterflies from time to time when I play there.
Well, they say it's good to be nervous. And what was it like when you were inducted into the Grand Ole Opry?
Well, I actually haven't been inducted yet. I'm just
What?
what they call, yeah, I'm actually what they call a guest artist who performs there on a regular basis. There's a lot of us who still aren't members that you would think are members. I mean, Kenny Rogers was never a member. Conway Twitty was never a member. Gosh, the Judds. I mean, there's so many great artists that come in my era that never has been a member yet. But I think it comes in time. And when the time is right, hopefully that will happen. It's on my bucket list. But I get to play there a lot. So being what they call a guest artist is an honor within itself.
Well, absolutely. Well, let's talk about this amazing 40th anniversary of your album, Finally. What kind of memories does that bring back to you?
I remember the first day I heard the song. I was in Tree Publishing Company in Nashville, Doc, and my record producer, Buddy Killen, and I were listening to songs. But through the walls in the office next to me, I kept hearing a song being played. And when I got through with my meeting with my producer, I walked next door and I said, I heard a song through the wall. What is that? He said, it's a Gary Chapman song that has just been written. And I said, you didn't pitch it to me for my album. And I think it's a hit. So that one memory comes to mind of how I found the song and when I found it and how it evolved into a hit album and a hit single. Uh, But I have been blessed to have climbed that mountain 21 times to go to number one, and that was one of my favorites finally. And the album was a fun project to do.
Well, when you're going through songs, if you're sitting down with a songwriter or you're going through demo tapes or a catalog of songs, how what is there a special vibe that hits you knowing that that's a potential hit song versus, hey, I love that song, let's put it on the record, but we need to release this one? I mean, is there a special vibe that you get when you hear certain songs?
There is, but there's two things you have to look for when you think you have found magic or a great song. The melody has to be something that you will catch yourself whistling or humming after you hear the song, maybe days later. And then, of course, the second most important thing is lyrically, the words have to hit you in the heart, they have to connect. So, those are the two things that I look for when I'm looking for magic in hit songs. And with Finally, it was the melody, of course, caught my ear. That's the first thing that catches you is always the melody. And then if the lyric is strong enough to go with a melody, then you have usually got a hit record. So those are the two things that I look for when I'm picking songs to record.
Yeah, I think one of the things you said is vitally important. If you hear the tune stuck in your head for a few days after, that to me tells you that there's a hit on your hands because you want the same thing to happen to all of the listeners and the fans when they hear the song.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then also, I enjoy picking songs that I envision myself doing on stage because if you record a song that becomes a hit, you're going to be singing that song on stage the rest of your life. So you want to pick those songs that you think you will enjoy doing live. And so that comes into play too.
Well, that makes a whole lot of sense because I know that there are some songs that you'd listen to on an album, they sound fantastic, but sometimes they may not be a great song performing live. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Yeah. And you also have to remember that people, when they're listening to something, maybe riding down the road in their car or wherever they are on the radio, you have to pick songs that you know that radio will embrace because they're looking for those songs that their listener will, love hearing too. So there's a lot that goes into picking the music that any performer records, but the most important is that melody and that lyric.
Well, how has radio changed in the last 40 years, especially country radio?
Well, a lot like country music has changed. Radio and country technology has played a huge role in the quality of radio and the quality of records that are recorded. So, yeah, records are better, radio sounds better. I'm fortunate to be on SiriusXM, which I think has the greatest sound of any radio in the world. And my show, Prime Country, which I do there weekly, uh, it's very technical. I mean, there's a lot that goes on with button pushing and things that have to happen just perfect to make the show. So the technology has changed a lot in radio and in making records, but it's changed for the better. It really has.
Well, I went on Spotify and I looked up you. And what I found out was that you have a minimum of 25 million plays of your songs with a monthly listenership of 250,000 per month. So, how does that make you feel?
Well, I still have to pinch myself, first of all, Doctor. I mean, really and truly, you're looking at a guy right now and hearing a guy that always dreamed of doing this. And for it to finally happen, there are some days that when I'm riding down the road and I hear one of my songs, or I hear my radio show, or I'm in a concert or something, I have to pinch myself because I am a prime example of a person who dreamed of doing something and the dream came true. I want to be an inspiration for anyone who has a dream in life, no matter what it may be, that if you work hard enough and believe hard enough in your dream, it can happen, it can come true. So yeah, I have to pinch myself a lot to actually, realize that everything in my life that's happened and continues to happen is the real deal. I mean, because it's an exciting way to live and make a living.
Well, you have, you are literally, I think, one of the most perfect people to have a SiriusXM radio show. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't seen my interview with TG Shepard and his wife Kelly Lang that I did about, I think it was sometime last year, you need
Yeah.
to watch it just so you can understand the power of storytelling through TG Shepard. Absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, serious, TG, I would literally sit down to dinner with you and never say a word just so I could hear you tell stories.
Well, a good friend of mine, Dave Ramsey, of course, we all know who Dave Ramsey is. I mean, he's helped so many people financially worldwide. I'll sit with him at dinner, and usually we catch up for just a few minutes on our lives, but then he wants to hear Elvis stories and things that have happened in my life. I am a storyteller. I love conversation. I love connecting with people because communicating with people is the key to success, is communication. And I am. I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories, and I'm glad that you always enjoy my stories whenever we get into a conversation. But I really have lived an exciting life, and I enjoy talking about it. And in that life has been a lot of great stories.
Well, have you ever thought about putting it all into a book?
Oh, I'm doing that now.
All right. Well,
You had mentioned that.
I want to be the first to interview you on that.
You know what? You're the first to know that I'm doing that. I haven't mentioned that. I just recently started, outlining how I want to tell the book or how I want to tell the stories. And I remember the old movie "It's a Wonderful Life" with Jimmy Stewart, the Christmas movie. You
Yeah.
know, in that movie, if you had taken him out of that movie, his life, the way he connected with people, it would have altered history in a lot of ways if one life is not there. So I think I want to tell my story that my life has been a wonderful life and that I have met people along the way that has altered the course of my life. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting heavily involved in writing the book. I'm going to write it myself because I think it's important if a person can write to have it come from their viewpoint as opposed to a ghostwriter. And so, I'm hopefully we'll have it done next year, and it'll be hopefully some great stories in the book.
Oh, well, I've already heard a few, so I know for a fact that it will be a bestseller when it comes to the stories of TG Shepard. And ladies and gentlemen, I
Uh,
will be the first standing in line for this book. Well, TG, I want to ask you, in the 40 years since the release of your finally album, and knowing that when this album was released, you already had nine number ones prior
yeah,
to the album. So what
right.
has been your most treasured memory in country music?
My most treasured memory in country music is narrowed down to two or three things. One we mentioned earlier, of course, doing the Opry for the first time. That was on my bucket list. That's every performer's dream if you're a country artist. The second was I had to pinch myself when I played the White House a few times for our presidents. There's no greater honor that can come to a performer to be invited by the President of the United States to perform for them. And I got a chance to perform for President Reagan, and I performed for President Bush, 41. And to be playing at the White House was truly one of those magical moments in my career memories. There have been a lot, of course. Uh, Meeting Elvis the first time uh, is one of those magical moments in my life. It altered my life forever. So that's just a few right there.
Wow. I mean, is it, do you get, I mean, is the nerves different by singing in front of the President of the United States versus singing before your audience or your fans?
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean, a performer is nervous anytime they're performing in front of someone like a president or another performer that may be may be a mentor to you or someone you look up to or somebody you want to be like. I've had the opportunity of working the road and doing shows with, God, one of my dearest friends, Kenny Rogers. God, I miss Kenny so much. I was always nervous to sing on his shows because he would stand in the wings and he would watch me. And he was the consummate performer. And so to have someone watching you like Kenny that you look up to, it's very nerve wracking. But presidents and other performers is when I have the toughest and most difficult time performing because it's different than playing to just your fans because your fans are out there and and you can't live without those fans. They make you and give you everything in your life. But it's different when you're playing to someone like a president or another performer.
Yeah, because I think if you're singing in front of your fans, there's probably some comfort there.
There is. Yes, that's a good way to put it. They, through their applause and through, you can look into their eyes and tell if they're into what you're doing or not. There is a comfort and it's a confidence builder. But I don't necessarily get that comfort or confidence playing for a president or another superstar performer. But you're right. There's a comfort that comes from playing for the fans that buy the tickets to come see you.
Well, I have to ask you a question, and this question does not come from me.
Okay.
My daughter Madison is a absolute huge fan of Dean Martin,
Yeah.
and she says, "Can you please ask TG a question?" I said, "Sure. What's the question?" So her question is this: You sang with Dean Martin at SeaWorld. How did that come about?
Well, that was back in what we call the hot years, back in the 80s when we were having all the number ones. And the William Morris agency at that time was my agency that booked all of our dates. And I guess the Dean Martin show reached out to them and said, "Look, who is hot on the charts right now? Who do you think would fit our show?" And for some reason or other, I wound up being one of those artists that got invited to come do the show. Now, I was nervous that day because I'm a huge Dean Martin fan. I always have been. My mom was the biggest Dean Martin fan in the world. And to be sitting next to him, I met him for the first time in the makeup trailer. We were sitting there, and I look over, and there he sat, and they were putting his makeup on. And I looked over, and he looked at me, and he said, "Hey, Pally." I said, "Hey, Mr. Martin, how are you?" And so Dean Martin was a gracious guy, super talent, but one of the funniest guys to be around. And I was honored to be able to do that Christmas special. I think it might not have been a Christmas special. I think it was just a regular special from SeaWorld in San Diego. I think Buck Owens was on that show and Lynn Anderson. There was a lot of people on the show that day. But tell her that Dean Martin was the best. He was a consummate performer. The Rat Pack, one of the Rat Pack guys. They don't get any better than that.
Oh, I know that. Well, she will absolutely appreciate the answer, TG, and she sends you and Kelly her love as well. She's
Oh yeah,
big fans, I can tell you that. But she's also probably one of the biggest, youngest Elvis fans that I
really.
know of. But we'll get into that in a moment. But I want to ask you because your show on SiriusXM, the TG Shepard show, has moved from the Elvis channel to Pure Country. Will we see any changes in format with your show?
Yes, the TG Shepard show on Elvis Radio was all about Elvis because that's what people tune in for. They want to hear Elvis's music. Uh, in my interviews, there were geared toward people that had maybe met him or never met him, but had something to say about him or how he influenced their careers. But the difference now on Prime Country is that that's the channel of the 80s and 90s music of country. And it was the most popular years. So therefore now on the new show on Prime Country, which is Channel 58, if you get a chance to check it, it's every Friday from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern. You'll hear me interview people like my first artist was Reba McEntire. Then I've got Barbara Mandrell coming up, Tracy Lawrence this week, Ronnie Milsap. you'll be able to hear different artists on there, and you'll be able to hear me play their music. Whereas before on Elvis radio, I only played Elvis's music. But now I get a chance to play my guests, their hit records, and play a few of my number ones too. So it's a different format, but still it's SiriusXM radio, and they are the best. If you're going to have a radio show, that's where every performer wants to have it, is on SiriusXM, and I'm very blessed to have one there.
Oh, amen to that, TG. And you really bring something up about the 1980s and the 1990s. Wow, what a powerful time for country music.
Yeah.
It was like a never-ending train. I mean, even other music genres were absolutely jealous of the power and the takeover of country music across America. I mean, what was that time like for you?
Well, it was incredible because country music was moving from not traditional, but it was moving more into a pop vein. It was getting a little, the demographics were changing when I came into it. And I came into it right at the time Urban Cowboy hit. And when you've got John Travolta wearing a cowboy hat and boots, it becomes the thing. Country music became the huge sensation that it was because of the urban cowboy movement, Mickey Gilley and Johnny Lee, those friends. So I was able to come along at that very magical time in the 80s with Urban Cowboy. So it was a little different than today. But, without change, uh, things can't grow. There has to be change. And today's country music, as opposed to then, the performers of today are bringing in a whole new audience to country music that maybe they hadn't heard of TG Shepard or the Oak Ridge Boys or people like that. And now they're hearing us through the new performers who are bringing those new people in. So it's a great time. But yeah, those magical years of the 80s and 90s, that's when music really was something.
Yeah, I mean, it was to me, I remember the first day I heard Randy Travis's Forever and Ever Amen.
Oh
And
yeah,
it's like the song that was almost the spark that kicked those 2 decades
yeah,
into high gear.
yeah, yeah. The first time I ever heard Randy, uh, I was at a place called the Nashville Palace, and I was sitting in the audience, and the guy in the band said, "We're going to bring a guy out now from the kitchen who's a dishwasher back here, and he's got a great voice. Would you please make welcome Randy Travis?" And he was a dishwasher. He walked out from the kitchen, took off his apron or whatever he had on, and he got up on the stage and just knocked everybody out with his voice. I knew instantly, as well as everybody else, that this guy was going to be a superstar. And lo and behold, he became one.
Yeah, I mean, just the stories of him stepping out from the kitchen. My
Yeah.
gosh, I mean, and you're right, and look what happened. I mean, he
Oh,
ended up being one of the big. I mean, really just accepted just about every award they could throw at him, and that was actually one of the questions that I had for you. I mean, a lot of performers tell me that the awards don't really mean a whole lot. It's great that they're noticed, but did winning any of the big awards for you? What was that like for you? I mean,
well, anytime you're recognized for what you do, it builds confidence in you as a performer because when you realize that when the accolades come to you, you realize that you say to yourself, well, maybe I'm doing something right here, or they wouldn't be honoring me, or they wouldn't be giving me this. So the awards are very important to any performer. They'll tell you that they're not, but they really are. And you never get tired of walking through your home or your office as a performer and looking up and seeing gold and platinum records or awards that has been presented to you. You never get tired of that. There are a lot of nights, Doc, that I might have had a hard day and maybe I can't sleep or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I will ease into my media room and I'll look around and it's an incredible moment to look at what you've done, you know. So those things are very important to every performer, although they may tell you they aren't important, but they are.
Well, I appreciate the honest answer, and I think you've given me the most honest answer than anybody has ever given me on that question. So I highly appreciate that. And I know
Welcome.
the fans do too. And I went to your website, and you have a very big touring schedule from what I've seen, what it's like being back on the road again.
Well, it's always fun to be on the road. The road is very tough. I mean, I pack a suitcase every week and leave out on a plane or a bus. Or the shows are wonderful. Performing is addicting to a performer. Trust me. When you walk on a stage and you hear the applause and you hear your name mentioned and the lights come on, you're in a magical place. And you can't find that magic anywhere else in your life except on that stage. But getting to that stage with traveling is grueling. It's very difficult. Our tour schedule is insane. I every day get phone calls of, can you go here? Can you do a date here? And there's just not any space left for a lot of dates because I still want to be home some, and I have to recharge my batteries like any performer. But our touring schedule, you can go to tgshepard.com to keep up with our tour schedule, and there's dates being added every week. But since COVID, it's a whole new ballgame. When it was taken away from us, and then suddenly this past year we got a chance to go back to play to people sitting in seats and live audiences. It's very exciting. It's like starting all over again. It's a very exciting time for me and my career to be able to go back on the road and sing to people because that's really all that's really what it's all about is just singing on stage and connecting with your audience.
Yeah, even with the 2 years during the pandemic, and I know it was extremely hard on so many performers and all the crews that work behind the scenes. But now that everybody's back out, I've noticed that it's almost like the crowds are larger than ever. And everybody, the fans, are so glad to be back out at the venues, supporting their favorite artist, watching the shows, and singing along. I mean, have you noticed that?
I have. I've noticed the crowds are getting bigger and they're getting younger. It's a strange. We always do meet and greets, and after the shows, we always try to go out to the merchandise table and greet people because I think by greeting people, you have your finger on the pulse of your public, of your fan base, and they'll tell you what they like and don't like. So I always go out and visit with them. But the crowds have gotten younger, and I asked these people. I said, "How old are you?" "Well, I'm 20 or I'm 21." I'm going, "I started out 40 something years ago. How do you know the words to those songs when I'm on stage and I look out and see you singing those?" "Well, my mom or my dad or my grandmother played your music in the house." So it's exciting to be back singing to crowds again and seeing them sing along with you, but it's exciting to see a whole new uh, dimension taking place, a whole new fan base coming in to experience country singers and their concerts. Very exciting time.
Yeah, I just think it's absolutely fantastic. And that's what keeps the industry rolling along. It's
Sure.
all of us passing the music down to our kids. They're enjoying it. They want to go out. They want to see the same performers like you. And I mean, my gosh, I am the biggest fan of the 80s and the 90s country music. I
Really?
mean,
Okay.
oh, and some of the 70s, of course, but it was just, I mean, to me, it's like a steamroller that never stopped. It just kept going and going and going. But the songs I mean, every song that you heard was a massive hit.
Well,
And you
back
had
back in
21
the
of them.
well, I had 21 of them, but gosh, I have to pinch myself again with that. I only dreamed of having one or two, and then to have that many. But in the 80s and 90s, country music was about stories. It was storytelling, which we started off the conversation today with stories. We've gotten away from that in country music a lot the last few years. I'm missing the melodies and I'm missing the stories. And it's the 80s and the 90s still give us that, those artists of that era. And although there are a lot of new artists coming in that is giving us story songs again, Luke Combs is great. Alan Jackson has always given us great stories. Blake Shelton's a good storyteller. So there are a few of the new artists that are bringing that back that we had in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, and I mean, always been an Alan Jackson fan.
Yeah,
Love Luke Combs.
yeah,
I'm a big Little Big Town fan.
yeah. Who isn't? They're great.
It's
I mean,
great to.
I used to bump into them at what back then was called Fanfare. It's now called CMA Fest. And I would sit back in the green room with them before they ever had a hit record and just visit with them. And they were just dreaming of making it in music. And look what they've done. I mean,
Yeah.
I love to see I love to see performers' dreams come true. You know, there's a saying, and I think it was from T.S. Eliot. I'm not sure. A lot of people will walk up to me sometime and go, you know, I dreamed of being a singer, or I dreamed of doing this, or I dreamed of doing that, but I got older and it passed me. I'm here to tell you and anybody who's listening right now that no matter how old you are in your life, if you have a dream, it's never too late to be who you might have been. So keep dreaming because it can still come true. But Little Big Town, I love them.
Oh, fantastic. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, TG Shepard. And you got to tune in to his on the Pure Country channel on SiriusXM. Remember, it's every Friday night. Well, every Friday at 3 p.m.
Every
Eastern.
Friday, yeah, it's
And
prime
again on
time for TG
Saturdays
Shepard
at
show.
12 a.m. Eastern, as well as Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time as well.
Yes,
And
we're
don't
on.
forget, you got to head over to tgshepard.com for all of his music, his merch, and his tour dates. So, hey, I'm a big TG Shepard fan. You're a big TG Shepard fan, ladies and gentlemen. So tune in. And when TG comes to your town, buy the ticket, buy the merch, and continue to buy the music. I will stand on my soapbox forever for every recording artist to make sure that is done. And TG, wow, absolutely fantastic. But, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to Elvis Week, and we have none other than TG Shepard, one of Elvis Presley's close friends with us today. And TG, right off the bat, how did you meet Elvis Presley?
Wow, it was predestined, Doc. I told my mom when I was 13, I said, Mom, someday I'm going to meet Elvis. He's going to become my friend. And she said, Son, I hate for you to get your hopes up too high because the chances of you ever meeting him, let alone becoming his friend, are astronomical. Well, at 15 years old, my mom and dad had divorced, and I was living at home with my dad. He was very strict and didn't want music in the house. I knew I wanted music for my life. So I climbed out of the back window at 15 years old and I ran away from home. And I hitchhiked to Memphis and was living in the alleyways and eating out of garbage cans, literally, at that age. And late one night, I was at a skating rink and I'm standing out in front. The lights were off, and three or four Cadillacs pull up. And Elvis gets out from behind the wheel of the lead car and walks right over to me. And he asked me where I was going. And I said, they're closing the rink down, so I'm leaving. And he said, oh no, they're opening it up for me. Of course, I'm looking into the blue eyes of Elvis Presley. I mean, it was just, I'll never forget that moment. I was excited. I had fear. It was an emotional roller coaster meeting him and having him talk to me. And so I went inside and roller skated with he and his mafia friends at the time, not knowing that I would someday become one of those mafia guys. And after we roller skated that night and we met, he asked me, he said, are you hungry? And I said, of course, in those days, I was starving all the time, being, homeless, so to speak. He put me in the car and drove me up to Graceland, fed me the famous peanut butter and banana sandwich. We talked till 8 o'clock in the morning. And he said, give me your phone number. And I thought, yeah, sure. He'll never remember me, after tonight. This is a one-time thing in my life. It'll go down as a great memory. Well, lo and behold, the next day, I get a phone call from Charlie Hodge, who worked for Elvis. And he said, Elvis wants to know what you're doing tonight. And I said, well, I'm not doing anything. You want to go to the movies with us? And I said, well, I'd love to. And they had a car come pick me up, take me to the Memphian. And from that night on, we were close friends until the day he passed, 16 years later. And Elvis was one of those rare individuals that, to a lot of people, he's the king. But he always said there was only one king, and that was Jesus Christ. I always respected that he said that. But he was the most down to earth person that I've ever known, the most spiritual person I've ever known. He used to sit and read me the Bible and tell me his interpretation of the scriptures. Wow. Just to have one of those moments back and hear his voice and have him read me a scripture from the Bible again would be the most incredible wish I could ever have come true again. But I know I'll see him again, and I know he'll read to me again. He's just an incredible human being. But I met him in a roller rink. Long story short, I met him in a roller rink in Memphis when I was 15.
Wow. Now, let me ask you this, TG. What is, of all that time you spent with Elvis, what was your biggest memory? I mean, yes, meeting him. And I know about the story of when you were heading to Nashville the day before Elvis died, but of that whole 16 years, what would be the biggest memory of your time with Elvis that you will always cherish?
There are two or three. He called me up late one night. I was asleep, 1 o'clock in the morning, and he said, anytime he would call me, the words were always, what are you doing? On this particular night, I said, well, I'm sleeping. What do you need? He said, I need you to come out to the house. So I get dressed, I get in my car, and I drive out to Graceland. I'm driving up the gates, up the driveway. He's headed out the front door. He said, get in the limo. I said, where are we going? He said, Dallas. I said, Dallas, Texas? He said, yeah. Of course, he had just bought a little small Jetstar, which is parked next to the Lisa Marie at Graceland. Well, we're on the plane, and this is a great memory. We're on the plane sitting knee to knee, maybe 2 feet apart from each other. Small jet, only seated maybe 6 people. And he looked me in the eye and he said, I bought you a bus today. I said, a tour bus? He said, yep. He said, I bought you a tour bus to kind of help you get started. I like that new record you got, Devil in the Bottle. He said, I love hearing it, love singing along with it on the radio. I sent J.D. Sumner and Larry Strickland, who was married to Naomi Judd. I sent them up north on a private jet to pick you up a bus and bring it back to you. That was probably one of the most memorable moments of my career and my life, to have Elvis Presley believe in me enough to gift me with that large of a gift. And what it did, somebody asked me one time, is that the greatest gift he ever gave you? No, it wasn't. The bus was the catalyst for what he really gave me. What the bus did was give me the confidence that someone like him believed in me enough. It gave me the confidence to work harder and not let him down. So I worked harder, and that's the reason that I was able to break through, is that I didn't want to disappoint someone like him who believed in me. So that was one of my most memorable moments with Elvis.
That brings me back to a story, TG, that I've heard. I was very fortunate enough to meet J.D. Sumner.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that J.D. was probably the one that kind of birthed the tour bus.
Yeah.
And to hear you tell that story and knowing it was J.D. going out to find that bus, because and you probably know the story about J.D. when he got his bus. Elvis told him, I want to be the first one to drive it. And it scared J.D. to no end with the way Elvis was driving that bus. He's like, oh my gosh, he's going to tear up my tour bus before I get to start touring in it. But, it's just to hear you tell that story. I mean, that just shows Elvis the man. I mean, not just the entertainer, but a man with a heart that has generosity. He's just generous, generous from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. I mean,
You
that's
know,
Elvis Presley.
I asked him one time, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned this. I asked him one time, I said, why do you give everything away? I mean, someone would walk up to him and say, that's a beautiful ring, Elvis. And he'd say, here, I want you to have it. He'd give things away, houses, cars. And I asked him one time, I said, why do you do that? He said, let me tell you where it started. He said, when I lived in the projects in Lauderdale Court in Memphis and we were poor, there were some kids a couple of doors down that when they would get through with their comic books, we couldn't afford to buy them. They would come and give them to me to read as a gift. And that feeling of when they gave me those comic books, those gifts to me, that feeling, I wanted other people to know that feeling someday. And so when I got into a position to give away large gifts, the reason I gave them was because I wanted the expression on their face and I wanted them to feel what I felt as a kid. So that's why he became a giver. One of the first things that ever happened was receiving those comic books. And he practiced that all through his life of giving and not taking.
Because he already knew the feeling of what it was like to receive,
Sure.
and he wanted other people to feel the
Yeah.
exact same way.
Sure. Yeah. He was just he was just a genuine guy. I mean, in the beginning when we were just developing the friendship, the first few weeks or months, it was really strange because I was intimidated. I was in shock still. But as the years went on, he just became a guy. He just became a friend. I still knew he was Elvis, but to me he was just a friend. He was just one of the guys who would sit and talk about anything, and who loved to laugh, and who I've seen him cry. Uh, just a great human being. And for every negative thing that anyone ever heard about Elvis, there's a million wonderful positive things that you'll never hear. He was just a great guy, and what a force, you know? I know he left us young at 42, but that old saying that the brighter the star, the quicker that it can burn out. And man, he lived a lot of life in his 42 years, but he was so bright that it was no wonder that he left us so young.
DG, my whole purpose of Elvis Week is to shine a big light on the man. None of the tabloid stuff and none of the
Right,
girlfriends and all that stuff.
right.
It's Elvis, you know, the man himself, the man behind the jumpsuits and the
Yeah,
movies, and you bring that forth to all of us, and I appreciate it. So, what did you think of the brand new Elvis movie?
I thought it was great. I've seen it more than once. When when I knew it was coming, I got a phone call from Jerry Schilling, and my dear friend Jerry. God, it's like a brother to me. We call each other brothers because, well, he's the only one I got left, him and Barry Gibb. And I got a call from Jerry, and I got a call from Priscilla. We stay in touch with Priscilla a lot. Kelly Lang, my wife, and I were fortunate to have her as a dear friend. And they both were telling us that you will be amazed when you see the movie. Uh, and I was. I went to see it a few weeks ago. Took me a moment to see Austin Butler as Elvis, but after a few minutes into the movie, you accepted it, and he had him down to movements. His he did his homework. Austin did.
Yeah, he did, and I remember, yeah, because we all saw the movie, and for me, the moment when he stepped on that stage for the 1968 comeback,
That was magic.
I was like, is that Austin or is that Elvis?
Sure. It
I
was.
mean,
I mean, it
crazy.
was grueling. It was grueling on Austin to the point to where when he got through, he had to just take some time off. It just strained him. Really and truly, the new Elvis movie is Elvis's second comeback. The 68, it's his second 68 comeback special. This is creating a wave of new fans coming in to discover Elvis for the first time. A lot of people. So it's the second 68 comeback special, the new movie. Uh, Tom Hanks playing Colonel Parker. I thought he did a great job. There were little things that I noticed differently, but because I worked closely with Colonel Parker when I was with RCA and Elvis. And but Tom Hanks just, I think, nailed Colonel Parker. And
Well, what was your opinion of Colonel Parker himself? I mean, not from the movie, from your personal dealings with the Colonel.
a lot of people put the Colonel down for uh, his percentages and stuff with Elvis and everything. I'm not saying that was right, percentage wise, but um, I really and truly believe that a lot of Elvis's success came because of the belief that Colonel Parker had. And he was loyal to Elvis. He was managing Hank Snow and Eddie Arnold at the time, and they went to the wayside. Elvis became his focus. And he saw in Elvis something incredible that maybe a lot of people didn't see at that time. And Vernon was a big Eddie Arnold fan. So with Colonel Parker managing Eddie Arnold, well, son, you got to let Colonel Parker manage you because he manages Eddie Arnold. So Parker did a lot for Elvis, but he was hard to work with for me. He was very intimidating. Uh, but I always admired the fact that he really, really believed in Elvis. And so there's pros and cons to Parker. He was a very multifaceted guy, and he was a perfectionist when it came to Elvis and how he wanted things done. So he did a lot of great for Elvis, and then I know that we would have seen more of Elvis in Europe and overseas if it hadn't been for Colonel Parker, because Elvis
Oh, yeah, I completely agree
wanted
with
to go
that.
there. Yeah, Elvis really wanted to go there, and that held him back. Star is Born could have been a huge movie to put Elvis into the serious acting roles that he wanted to do his whole career. But Colonel Parker did not want Elvis to do that because he felt that he would get second billing to Barbara Streisand. So there were some decisions made through Parker that I think were wrong that could have been better. But there's pros and cons about Parker. But I had a chance to work alongside of him, and Tom Hanks did a great job portraying him.
Well, I would like for you to share with all of my viewers and my listeners the very touching moment that you had with Elvis the day before he died.
Well, it was still tough. It was racquetball had taken place in the racquetball court that night. A crown had gotten loosened, and the tour was starting the next day, and he was going to go to the dentist late that night, and he was sitting in the car, and I went up to the car, and I was headed back to Nashville that night, and I just squatted down next to the car and put my hands in the window, and he said, "Take care of yourself, and you're going back home." I said, "Yeah, I'm going to Nashville," and he just put his hand on my hand and said, "Be careful, I love you." He never told me that before. And I wondered afterwards, was he saying goodbye to me? I don't know. But that was the last words he spoke to me.
Mm.
Very touching, touching night. The whole time that I was around him was touching. He touched my heart in a way that no other performer ever will.
Well, Elvis was the man. No, there is no greater entertainer um, that we've ever seen on the face of this earth. Sold more albums than anybody could even count.
Yeah.
Touched lives. And ladies and gentlemen, this is what I want you to see. I wanted you to see Elvis, the human being, the giver, the friend. And you've seen this from his close friend, TG Shepard. And TG, I want to thank you so much for sharing us with your time today and the stories of Elvis Presley.
Well, there'll never be another Elvis. Uh, the amazing thing for me is that I think a lot of people are still in denial that he's gone because what's happened, he is still here so vividly through his music, photos, movies, radio shows, and now the new movie. A lot of us, including me for the first few years, I was in denial the first couple of years. I didn't mourn really until a year or two later when I just sat down one day and I said, wow, he's really gone. I'll never see him again, but I know I will. Uh, he left behind an incredible legacy, and we're still enjoying that legacy 40 something years later now. And with this new movie, I'm telling you, it's an incredible movie that everyone should see. If you love music, and if there was ever anything about Elvis Presley that you ever admired or loved or liked, you need to experience the movie. I
Yeah.
strongly recommend it. Yeah.
I do too. I mean, it took us hours, I think, to come down after watching the film because there was just so much to
Yeah.
absorb and to think about. And I've got to hand it to Baz Luhrmann for
Oh man, he
what a vision! What a
it,
vision!
and it was an emotional roller coaster for me because I was throughout the movie in a lot of those places like the International Hotel and on tour with Elvis through my RCA years. And the ending of the movie to me was I was very saddened at the end to see the way it ended. It had to end. The movie had to end that way, but it was sad. I felt really sad for a few minutes after the movie ended. I just kind of sat there and was drinking it all in. But it was. I think he would be proud. I think he would be very, very proud if he could see them. And who knows? He's probably seen the movie already.
Yeah, I mean, wow. And you said it perfectly. This is Elvis's second comeback.
Yeah,
And I can already tell, not just all of us who have always been fans, but the brand new fans. And I was even talking to my wife yesterday. I said, I'm sure Graceland, the tour has just exploded. She goes, I've heard it's getting bigger than ever. More and more
yeah,
people are wanting to see this man, Elvis Presley. And but yeah, Elvis's second comeback, it's here and it's here to
yeah.
stay.
And you know what? It'll keep coming back because when you're that big in life, you never go away. Never.
No, not at all. And TG, wow. Again, I want to thank you for your time sharing
No,
us your life and your life with Elvis Presley. It's been an absolute blessing.
thank you. It's always good to visit with you. Hope to have dinner with you soon.
That is going to happen. And ladies and gentlemen, be sure to tune in to the TG Shepard Show on SiriusXM's Prime Country Channel 58 every Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern and again on Saturdays at 12 a.m. Eastern and Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. Go to tgshepard.com for all of his great music, his merch, and his tour dates. We'll be right back after this.